probably do some of those, and we could actually have the signs installed next year, and do some studies or design of other projects. If you pick Middlefield, it'd most likely be design only, because that's gonna require plans and specs, surveying, et cetera, and more environmental work. So this is not, again, as with the other master plans, this is not a specific project, but it gives you some capabilities. And the reason for the slightly larger amount next year is it's more likely that these can be implemented more easily than the pipes projects, like drainage, or the parks projects. So that's why we gave the council the opportunity, when this comes back to you, to give specific direction to staff to see some implementation.
You know, when we look at the master plan, 5th of April, and subsequently before that, you know, at the end of March, it was the study group. You know, the input back to Kerry and his team.
The other Gary.
Yeah, not.
Yeah.
That's okay, I'll take it.
No,
Casey, sorry.
No, you can't, Casey, right,
Casey.
Casey, yeah.
And his team was that we wanted to focus on the safe routes to school and where we've had accidents. And honestly, and then of course then he gave us this list, and of course that list never got updated because that's not necessarily what he thought we needed to do.
It's this list up here.
Well, this list doesn't have any projects listed.
Oh.
You know, it has some of them.
Well, the Elena
Yeah,
also,
right,
Barry
yeah,
Selby.
yeah, those
Elena.
weren't included in there. So what we were looking at one time that we brought up was specifically Selby Lane. And I don't know what's needed to improve the safety down in Selby Lane, but all of us have been down that road. It's a very narrow road. There are no bike paths down there, and it's a hazard not only getting across El Camino, which is another discussion topic, but then also, you know, the kids walking down there, and if you've been there at school time, it is a madhouse. And so there needs to be some improvement on there. That wasn't on the list, you know, so, you know, I would like to see us at least call that out. The other thing we talked about was Middlefield was a big issue. A lot of accidents along Middlefield, almost the same amount, just by a few difference. I mean, I think it was like 19 or so on El Camino, and there was like 17 on Middlefield. The Middlefield was going to be part of the proposal that we were going to put together with the county and hopefully Redwood City and maybe Menlo Park for our grant. And so that would be one area where we need to do. Plus there's the project that I think Mike, Ewing and Gordon put together to say that we're going to restripe that Middlefield Marsh Road entrance so that there's not the confusion of do you get off, do you stay on, you know, what happens if you want to go straight and you're on a bike and the cars are all turning right, et cetera, et cetera. So that, you know, those are specific projects that rather than just see a $500,000 number up there, I think that if we could identify those and get agreement on those are the main projects we need to do, and the rest more or less kind of takes a back seat, you know, or it's, you know, like we do for the transportation committee. We allocate a certain amount of money to take care of certain projects, and the signage, or putting down sharks signs on the pavement. Well, yeah. No, they have those sharks.
The Sherrons.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so they could put those down, and that's, you know, that's a couple $100 or $1,000 here or there.
Sure.
Right,
So, and I think you'll certainly do that, though, once the master plan comes back for its acceptance. At that point, you're gonna say, Selby, Middlefield, et cetera, that's what we're gonna do, and that's what that $500,000 will be spent on.
So class 3.
Or whatever
Or
you decide.
whatever, okay,
Yeah.
Right.
because calling out Alejandra or Watkins as a bike boulevard, I was on Watkins just this morning going east, and a bicycle was in front of me, not on the sidewalk, not on the race side, but going east, and I had to follow him the entire way because cars were coming this way, there's just no room.
and they don't know where to go,
And they have
because they got that bump.
Well, they had the berm, you know, unless he had gotten onto that earlier on. So, yeah, just putting signs as a bike boulevard on some of these streets is, I think, more dangerous than not having it to be a bike path.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the timing of the master plans and where they are makes creating a 5-year master plan, basically as Vice Mayor indicated, placeholders. We're putting things in there that we're gonna bring back to the council once the master plan's complete and get your buy-in on doing Middlefield or Selby or more shallows or this or that in different areas of town.
So, yeah, and that's just a function of the fact that we're in the middle of the master plan stage and they're not done yet. And so I think the planning practice of creating placeholders is reasonable and we can accept it. In terms of guidance, the thing that I don't like on this, I think I'll try to extract from both what Councilmember Whitmer and Councilmember Lewis have said. I personally would rather us choose one project that we're gonna do, especially this bike and pedestrian master plan is a big target. There's a lot of meat in this thing, and we know it's gonna take us quite a bit of time to do much of it. I would prefer to take one thing that is at least class 2 and maybe class 1 to show the town what we can do, you know. If Middlefield is the most dangerous, and we agree that the most important priority is safe routes to school. So if Middlefield is the most important, let's take that. I would have been inclined to go for Atherton Avenue because it will be so visible if we do something there. And I'd like to show people, before we go into a, whatever, 10-year, $12 million project, some of which will be grants, I'd like to show people this is what we can do, so they can react to it.
Like to comment, Middlefield is much more dangerous because you got the kids riding bikes to high school, you got the kids riding bikes, and a lot of kids ride bikes to Ed's home. That's the big issue. Another big savings, and maybe we could work this in when we're working on the streets, or street repair. But there are all those roads over on the west side, and there are some here on this side, where we've decided we were putting these little asphalt curbs in the middle of the road. That really, when the cars can't move over because you have some, like a curb in the middle of the road, and if you're on a bike and you're turning, you can fall over it. One of our police officers, one that was a child, Sherman Hall, fell over one. He told us on our ride, and just as Councilmember Lewis said, when you have these things, the bicyclist or the car have nowhere to go. And I think really on some of these smaller streets, really we would be in good shape if we would take those out as we repair those. And I don't know if they're gonna come up on the street repair for next year or the resurfacing, but we need to shape those things down, and if it's done as part of this, or if it's done as part of the street repair, but those things I think will pay dividends for everybody, and I think that there should be a high priority.
I don't know when those were put in, like Fair Oaks and Middlefield, there's a divider as you go up, and Atherton Avenue as you come down, there's around that curve.
Well, there's around the curve, but then there are, right behind Sacred Heart Schools, there are several of them.
Right.
The eyebrows, they call them eyebrows, and Duncan Jones put those in to keep the cars from just plowing into the soft landscaped area, to make the like a channel for the cars to go. But the first time they put those in, they got totally devastated. They had to be repaired a couple of times before you kind of got the hang of it, and they're still all crunched up.
Yeah, that's right, there's nowhere for the cyclists and the cars share the road.
And there's no place to go,
Right, that's right.
because of the soft dirt and everything. I agree with Vice Mayor DeGoya about picking a project and really focusing on it. I just don't want it to be a one-off. We've got to continue, we've got to
Well, we've got a whole master
gotta do
plan
it
that's
and do
gonna
it,
be
you know,
really
and roll
serious.
it out.
I mean, we all felt that the quality of that master plan
Was
was
the
the
best.
best quality.
You're right, absolutely.
So
Well, the civic center was good.
Well, ignoring the civic center because it's a different deal.
Right, okay.
But of these
But,
three master
yeah,
plans, the
park,
quality of the
right,
bike pedestrian master plan
It's
is,
also
was
good.
extremely high quality, and we know there's gonna be projects that we're going to want to spend time to figure out how to fund.
Okay. Well, that's a
It's
priority of
important.
the council. We can
It's
identify one project,
Yeah.
do the study, find out how much it is, and
And I think
move it
there's
in.
room on Middlefield Road to do a class 2 or class 1.
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
So we'll continue this when we.
I think Middlefield Road is the right, I mean, I'd like the most visible, but I think Middlefield Road is the priority because of the safe route to school. We've identified that as not the top.
Well, I'd like to recommend that we have somebody take some time and look at both Middlefield and Selby and see if we can make, with the numbers that we have there, do something on each of them, because Selby is a big problem, and it's a problem, and it's a bigger problem waiting to happen, although there's only been a few accidents there.
And again, there are generous rights of way on Selby. It's just the road is skinny.
we'll bring that back to council with,
Once the bike master plan, we'll then start picking out projects. So I think we're on the same page, and I think public safety is key. Robert? Or
Thank you. Next up, to brief discussion, the street ceiling. As mentioned there, the most cost-effective way to maintain streets is to keep them kind of well-painted, as it were. Keeping water out of the streets maintains everything below them and the top. So that's why we use chip seals, slurry seals, to keep the water out and keep the streets in good shape at the lowest cost per square foot. One of the, we could, could this cycle be stretched out? Certainly. We don't know what the impact is, but we'd be able to know over time. Could we be doing other things? Yeah, at some point we probably will, because after about 2 applications of sealing, you've kind of, used up that concept, and the next time you probably have to do something, it might be a chip seal, or it might be a grind out and overlay in order to restore the ride quality of the street. But this particular program we're able to do on an annual basis, and as a result, Atherton has the highest pavement condition index in San Mateo County, one of the highest in the Bay Areas, and our costs are quite reasonable for the amount of streets that we have.
Yeah, I have a question.
please.
There's a resident that talks about Stockbridge having been overlaid so many times that it's literally, a foot higher? I was gonna say 6 inches.
No, he says it's a foot higher.
Anyway, and so how do you,
Okay.
explain that.
Sure. It may very well have been overlaid in the past.
Mhm.
The last 2 5-year cycles that the city did were sealing of this type, which is material that's about a 1/16 of an inch, maybe an 1/8 of an inch thick. So yeah, there are overlays that were done in the past, and maybe at some point, and that would be much more than the $250,000 annual program, we would have to go through, grind out a portion of Stockbridge and rebuild it, or overlay it in a different way. But it's not caused by this kind of treatment.
Could the dirt on either side have sunk and
Sure.
eroded?
Quite
Well, you
possible.
get a lot of flooding in there.
Right,
That's kind of what I.
This is lower Stockbridge.
right.
Yeah,
You got a
Yeah,
lot of
lower
flooding.
side, it's
Yeah,
not,
right off
it's
of El
not,
Camino.
yeah, it's right off.
Yeah,
There are
there,
coming right off El Camino and goes right into Jackson.
there are places throughout town where the drop off from the edge of the asphalt to the dirt is more than an inch or a half an inch or whatever, and that's most likely because water has gotten into that dirt area and it's been compacted over time. So, but that's not what this process would do, and so it would not aggravate the situation there.
Rick, please.
So in terms of guidance here, you did make the comment about how this could be stretched out, and I saw that there was more extensive commentary on that in the CIP. My thinking is, this is one of our most successful programs. The residents love this program. They see a tangible benefit from it I think it would be a mistake to stretch it out. I think we should continue it. I want to remain the town with the best street surfaces in the county, and I don't think we should stretch it out.
I would also point out that even though we get a computer printout from our consultant, and it says, next year do streets, A, B, G, and L, we look at and walk each of those streets, and if the street does not require a treatment, we may push that street off to the following year and substitute something else. So it's on, maybe, it may be averaging 6 years that we do the program, but we have enough money in there to be able to look every 5 years at every street. But we don't do it just because we have money. We don't like to spend money just because we have it. We spend it because we're seeing physical manifestations of damage that rise to the surface that we feel need to be worked on. And by the way, this program is in conjunction with one that I didn't emphasize, which is patching, where we go through and spend about $100,000 a year digging out the failed asphalt, patching it, and then sealing on top of it to preclude water intrusion.
That covered
Yeah.
Perfect.
I just want to say, you're pretty comfortable with these numbers because of historical costs.
We've actually been getting in even better bids than these, but you never know with the contractors. If we came back to you and said, we want to do the same quantity as last year, and they raised their prices, we'd have to ask for more money. So the contractors don't look at this money and say, yes, I'm going to spend it all by bidding high. We're getting very aggressive bids on this. Okay. Next project, briefly talk about, this is a federally funded surface transportation program, and it's on 3 of our collector streets and our arterial, Middlefield, Fair Oaks, and Atherton. This not only resurfaces, and when we say surface, this is going to be a slurry seal, so that's that 3/16 of an inch, 1/8 inch kind of material, and then on top of that we'll replace all of the bike lane markings, bike lane diagrams, stop bars, merge legends, center line striping, whatever it is, with material, either the dots or the thermoplastic, so that the street should be really in pretty good shape for 10 years. The reason we can do it on this street actually has 18 inches of asphalt, so its base is very good. So just doing the surface treatment here, we wouldn't even need to redo this in 5 years. But and point out that because of the matching funds, about 70% of this is money coming back to us from our federal dollars, and about 30% is the county.
Question?
Yeah. Two-part question. The first part is that if in fact we, do this, we shouldn't have to do it for 8 to 10 years. We did Atherton Ave, and maybe we only did a surface portion of it.
Yes,
but
this
it
is
was done for
doing
you.
the other portion.
Okay, all right, okay. My second and probably more important comment is that there's a big program right now going on with regards to putting in new water lines and other infrastructure, and that's why those streets are being torn up right now. So before we move forward and decide to, reallocate, or especially on Atherton Ave, we need to make sure the timing is right. And I'll also point out that there is a bond measure that's coming up, I think in November, that the West Bay Sanitation District is going to want to dig up all the streets with regards to putting in and repairing all the sewers. And so we need to be cognizant of those things because, as we've said on other things, why do something if we know it's going to be undone shortly? And there's nothing worse than paving and sealing the road again, and then digging it up, and, and on the technology, the vice mayor and myself are looking at, where can we actually put in infrastructure that's going to cover things. So I think that everything needs to be coordinated, but I do know that the water work is going on right now, because I was put on a trash truck ride along yesterday, and that was a big issue for us.
Thanks, Bill. Any other questions?
We'll make sure to coordinate. We always meet with the utilities beforehand, but in this case, because this is going to have a longer life cycle, and we would want to preclude them from doing anything over a longer period. We'll meet with the various agencies first to make sure that insofar as practical, they can get their work done before we do it. And if not, maybe we can delay ours without jeopardizing the expenditure requirements of the federal funding. So we'll,
Yeah, I just want to make sure you're
Thank you
aware,
very much.
and, you know, you focus on that.
Sure.
And I know that there's other work that's about to come, so we just need to make sure.
great, thank you.
I think that just pertains to all projects.
Right, well, and we do, but I think in this case, a heightened sensitivity. If there's no other questions on this, last two, we have two more to go, focus in 2 more minutes. The Civic Center, I just put this up here because you're all aware it's a significant project. The funding is such that we're looking at design next year. And that schedule will come back to you from the CCAC, and then construction starting in 15-16. Even though the construction will take more than the 12 months, we have to show the funding in the 1 fiscal year so that you have enough money on it when you award the contract. Last thing I'll point out is that toward the end of 16-17, sometime in that period, would be when we'd be looking for furniture, fixtures, and equipment in order to complete construction, and per discussions with the town attorney, the things that are non-construction may be able to be funded through town funds. Obviously, if you get more donations, that's something you certainly can consider, either the add alternates into construction or some of these FF&E. And I'll move on to the last item.
So wait, just a
Sorry.
clarification on that one. So your building capital, this is from the,
These are the fees collected by the building department
Right.
that where the cost for replacement of the modular structure was built into the fees.
and capital improvement would be.
That's general fund money.
EIR and general fund money, the 16, 17 being furniture.
Correct, for the furniture commission for the non-construction elements that would be eligible. Okay? And last, park improvement program, and here again, as with the other two master plans, these are, I think in Vice Mayor DeGolia's words, these are placeholders using capital improvement funding. Should you decide to move forward, or hopefully you will adopt the park master plan sometime next year, and should you decide that there's a specific project in there you wish to move forward on, this would allow funding potentially for design, and depending on which particular project, it might be possibly even some implementation. We didn't show a lot more funding in here because got to turn Robert upside down and shake the quarters out of his pocket, but so we just showed this kind of a placeholder, and to not forget that we'll have a master plan, and you'll likely want to move ahead with some implementation.
So,
These numbers just don't make, you know,
There's nothing.
so my comment on this, and I did share this number with the Old Palmer Park Foundation, because they asked what's happening. And the comment back was, yeah, okay, we know we haven't finished the park master plan, but clearly they're thinking there'll be more than $25,000, each year. And so, as we, thought about the $40,000, it might be better to at least have a placeholder to be able to take care of some things here. I can't think that a dog park would cost a lot of money, but there are other things that we bandied about, and it might be worthwhile for us to at least consider putting more money in there. I think it sends a better message, and covers off, that we don't know what we don't know. Now, there is going to be funding, as the city manager and I spoke the other day, there will be funding coming from the Little League, because they made a commitment to provide some money, and that's not included in our revenue stream, but and that only can be sent, and there's money also is going to be coming from the events, but it just, when you look at all the other numbers we have in here, and you look at $25,000, it's nothing.
Well, we could certainly increase that number, 50,000, 75,000. Again, it's simply a placeholder.
Well, I would recommend, since we've taken $40,000 out, perhaps, add 10 in, and then, and then add the rest in, or at least another 10 or 15, 16, just so that we're covered. Because I think that, as you pointed out to me on Monday, and we've talked about it here several times, we're putting in a lot of placeholders, but if we don't have the money, then it could become problematic. So let's go ahead and put it in. I recommend, if other people agree.
Yeah.
Are we making decisions?
We just provided some feedback.
Feedback,
Yeah.
please, Mayor, Vice Mayor Bolton.
Well, yeah, I actually think this is an order of magnitude off. I mean, we're putting in place holders for the bike path and for the drainage. We know these are gonna be expensive programs. So I think the numbers are right. I expect them actually over time to be larger than we've got in there. But I think this is an order of magnitude off.
You mean adding a zero to?
I think it should have a
Now
zero
that, as
On
you,
which one?
on the park.
if you recall, though, the park,
250,000?
Correct.
the park is all general fund money.
I understand that.
Okay.
But it's, I mean, we have a surplus, and if there's a place we need it, this is one of the places. The park has not been properly invested in for many years. Now, we have to have it designed right. I don't want to just be throwing money at it, but I think this is a place that we need, that this is our jewel, and we need to be able to show it off, and people need to feel good about it. I want to get feedback from the residents to confirm this is what they want to do. I think we have an overall plan to do that through all of these different things, but we're talking about placeholders. We're not talking about a specific program, and if we're sending the message that the bike path and the drainage costs are gonna be 20 times what we're gonna invest in the park. Now, I understand we can use parcel tax funds for that. Still, you know, at the end of the day,
I think
Ten
that,
times.
okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm throwing it out there.
I think that we should increase it, but I also think that the layout and reconfiguring and the park master plan is going to be a key component of how we should make those decisions on, you know, dumping what level of money and where.
Yeah, because we haven't seen anything that's,
Yeah, so,
uh,
so if we double that number at this point, I think we'd still be okay, but it doesn't mean that we won't reconsider once the master plan comes through and, you know, make other decisions.
Okay.
So the other thing before Gordon moves on, I wanted to see if we could add a placeholder, and primarily on the rails, if you heard Greg say some comments a little earlier. Obviously, we don't know what's gonna go on out there related to the tracks, but I think the ultimate goal would be for Atherton to have a quiet zone. And part of that quiet zone would be consistent with having the quad gates at Watkins, which would increase the safety and which would also increase train traffic through. We don't know what the long-term effects are of Caltrain doing modifications to this station and when we in fact get service. But whatever the project is going to be, it's going to be an expensive project, and I think the current estimation for quad gates at Watkins would be roughly $1 million. But I think that if we set a placeholder at this point to say, hey, and it may mean that we don't do it, if ultimately the decision, you know, with HSR or whatever goes down the line, and we just can't do it. But then those funds can always be returned. But to talk about a project in the future that we haven't even started saving some money for, which is $1 million price tag, which would be what an asset to the public safety factor related to Watkins, but you also have the factor that it would create that quiet zone through. I think they have to be tagged together, because the quiet zone would be, I think, a key element of the quad gates, which means trains would go through with no horn blowing.
Yeah, so, I know we've talked about quad gates for 5 years, 4 years, and first it was, all we needed was a letter of support because the train was gonna pay for it.
Sure.
Then it was, hey, could we throw $100,000 in?
Right.
And then it was, maybe it'd be as much as 200, now it's $1 million. And, you know, this is a creeping type of thing that, you know, personally, if you wanna throw that in the far out years, okay.
Yeah.
But not in the short term, and really, we pay part of our tax dollars go to that train,
Yeah.
and we don't get anything out of it. And so I think that we need to say, we're willing to pay for, half, but not the whole thing.
Right.
Seriously, and that's been our position, and Mr. Conlon and others have brought up this thing, and as I said, it's increasing every year, it gets bigger. We just can't do that. And we have a lot of good projects. Beaver Street was another one. The state was gonna pay for it, and then, we paid for most of it. And so, and there were all safety things, and I agree that that is a terrible intersection, and there are other ways to correct that intersection too.
Yeah.
But $1 million is, is the whole, under the old guide, it's 40% of, it's 40% of the parcel tax.
Sure.
And I think that, I just can't see spending $1 million on that, when they should be paying for part of it.
Yeah, no,
I don't think you're.
No, I'm not saying, believe me, I'm saying that if in fact, and believe me, it all may change based on what happens with the tracks itself. It may be that it's not feasible. Some would say that we should tunnel, we don't know. The fact of the matter is that they're talking about extending the length of stations, extending the length of trains, level boarding. These are all factors that could potentially affect how we do that. But I think the point really being that try to get in the game, start saving for a project that if it doesn't happen, we reallocate those funds
We
back
wanted
in.
to earmark a certain amount.
Certain amount, so that we,
Next year for, maybe looking for a 5-year plan.
5-year plan, and it may be an 8 to 10 year to get the gates in
Because
itself.
we would have more clarity in
Right.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
Why don't we consider something 3 years out?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of things on our plate.
I would say 5 years.
We could start with $100,000 and 3 years out, because there's gonna have to be some work
Yep.
going on, and then you have a little bit more money and a little bit more
Something
money.
like that.
Yeah, it's for quote unquote rail improvements or
Yep.
things like that,
Yeah,
but
but not to start spending it.
no, it's not, definitely it's not a project starting tomorrow, but it would be something that if in fact it comes to, everything starts to come into play, and it's 5 years, at least we have something to go to the table with.
Because I just think in the short term, we have a lot on our plates, as we
Yep.
pointed out, and there's a heck of a lot, other ways to spend the money that are
Absolutely.
just as important, if not maybe more.
Absolutely, and again, it might not ever happen, so those funds would, if it cannot happen, it would be returned back into.
We can certainly bring back something for the council's consideration at the next meeting, but just a caveat to how the 5-year CIP works.
Yep.
In those out years,
Yep.
there's no funding allocated, there's no savings for those. All that is are placeholders that play against potential revenue sources. So if you're looking at creating a set-aside fund that we're gonna start adding to, and we may eventually spend and then move that back into the general fund if we don't, that's different than putting it into the 5-year CIP at 3 or 4 years and keep moving it out until the project actually happens, and then we can maybe move the money forward. So it's a little bit different.
Like I said, I don't think that we were recommending, or at least, I don't feel good about putting money into it now. But I think if you have something in here, and this is how it's the last 3
Right.
years, if you show something, and we have a line item, and this is, a page in the document, and it says in 16-17, we're gonna put $100,000 in there. Next year when we do it, you'll be bringing that forward to us and saying, should we keep it here, do we move it out, do we add to it? And so it won't have been forgotten.
Right.
Okay.
And so
I just wanna make sure
that's
that
got
we're all on
value
the
in
same-
and
right.
of itself, but I don't think the near-term funding is something that I feel good about.
No.
Okay. All right,
I think that's-
we'll bring something back at the June 18th meeting for your consideration.
Beautiful, thank you. And with that being said, let's move on to item number 2, update of El Camino efforts with Caltrans. Mike Oswald.
Yes, okay, so as the council knows, over the last 18 months, the town has been meeting with Caltrans to address bicycle, pedestrian, and vehicular safety concerns along the 1.6-mile segment of El Camino Real within town. More specifically, our focus has been improving bicycle and pedestrian safety at the 5 existing crosswalks, and also to improving vehicle safety at the intersection of Selby and El Camino Real. Although there have been some improvements as outlined in your staff report, the most effective solution would be to reduce the number of travel lanes on El Camino from its current 6 lanes to 4 lanes. We've discussed this idea with Caltrans, and although they've been supportive supportive and open to the idea. The reality is that in order to move this forward, there needs to be fairly extensive technical review and analysis to determine what impact that it may or may not have on the other parts of Community Rail. And then also, as part of the process, it's going to be important to educate and to outreach and to get support and agreement with key stakeholders. In this case, primarily the adjacent cities, regional transportation agencies, and other stakeholders. That also must be attained in order to actually realize that reduction of limits. This effort will require staff resources and capital investment for the required technical studies, stakeholder outreach, and engagement. And also, along the way, at some point, it's going to require expenditure of some political capital as well, because it's going to require the meeting with and getting support of your elected colleagues within the area. So although it's a long road, staff believes it's a very important and significant road to truly improve the safety of El Camino Real. As far as reducing the number of travel lanes from 6 lanes to 4, the benefits of that, of course, will be it's going to reduce the amount of lane that pedestrians have to cross, which is going to improve pedestrian safety. It's going to reduce vehicular speeds, which is going to improve pedestrian safety. It will give the ability to create some intersection portals at these crosswalks, kind of a refuge in the middle of the street for pedestrians, which is going to improve pedestrian safety. And it will also provide the ability to establish Class 1, so in other words, off-road bike and pedestrian paths along El Camino Real if the town was successful in getting the number of lanes reduced. Your staff report outlines some short-term improvements that have already been done, and specifically some enhanced crosswalk markings. And one of the things that the town maintenance staff continually does is try to remove the overgrown vegetation, as you've probably been seeing over the last couple of weeks, to improve visibility. Also, in our discussions with Caltrans, they indicated that they would like to install some what they call rapid flashing beacons across El Camino Real.